Hello, and welcome to Managing Your VISTA project. This webinar is the first step in a training for AmeriCorps VISTA supervisors. My name is Andy King, and I'm a training specialist with the Corporation for National and Community Service. In the next couple of weeks, you'll be attending an in-person supervisor orientation that will focus on your role in guiding and managing VISTA members. Today's session focuses on your responsibilities in managing the VISTA grant and the overall project. As I said, my name is Andy King, and I'm a VISTA training specialist. With me today are Sarah Brady, who is a state program specialist at our state office in Ohio, and Andy Clark from Education Northwest, who will be assisting us with technology and helping us with the Q&A. Later on, we'll hear more from Sarah about managing your VISTA project. I want to just review quickly the outcomes for today's session. This session is meant to focus on key pieces that will give you an idea of what you need to do in order to succeed as a VISTA supervisor. We will cover the VISTA project in the context of the National Service Network, how to communicate with your state office through both formal and informal methods. We'll outline for you your project responsibilities and ways of managing your project, and show you some opportunities that you and your state office can support your VISTA members. And then we'll give you a little bit of information about the upcoming supervisor orientation. To provide a little bit of context, I think I'm ahead of myself here. To provide a little bit of context, I'd like to show you what we call the National Service Network. So the federal government agency that manages national service programs is known as the Corporation for National and Community Service. That is the agency where I work and Sarah works. And the Corporation for National and Community Service operates or runs three major program areas. The first is called Senior Corps, and Senior Corps is a program of various service opportunities for older adults age 55 and over to provide a whole range of services from what we call senior companions, providing companionship and some light assistance for older adults or people who are living with chronic illness, foster grandparents, which provide like a foster like a mentoring program or sort of like a big brother, big sister, but more in the role of a big grandmother or grandfather. So that's the grandparent role for at-risk youth. And then the Retired Senior Volunteer Program, RSVP, that provides seniors 55 and over with a whole range of volunteer and service opportunities ranging from disaster relief to arts education to community development. On the right side of the screen, you see the Social Innovation Fund. This is sort of a idea generator, and it's an opportunity to take great ideas to scale. So the concept is we make a federal investment through a relatively large grant to a national organization, and then that organization matches the money with private contributions, essentially doubling the amount of resources available, and then they make smaller grants to organizations that are already doing things that work in the community. So they have proven practices, and they've got some evidence that what they're doing is working. And the idea of the grant is to help them take it to scale. So the smaller organizations that receive those small grants, again, have a requirement to match that funding with additional resources. So in the end, every federal dollar gets matched and turns into $4. So that's the Social Innovation Fund. And then in the middle, you see AmeriCorps. And AmeriCorps is now celebrating its 20th anniversary, and we're very proud of that. There are three major streams of service within AmeriCorps. There's AmeriCorps NCCC, which is the National Civilian Community Corps. This is a program for young people ages 18 to 24 they're involved in direct service, providing very hands-on type of skills. So it could be things like school rehabilitation or refurbishment. There's a lot of outdoor stuff like trail building and wetland restoration in national parks or other public lands. And they do a lot of work with disaster response, preparation and mitigation. NCCC also has a core within it that's known as FEMA Corps that works very closely with the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and their focus is entirely on emergency preparation and response. The next stream of service within AmeriCorps is AmeriCorps state and national programs. These are programs that receive grant money through a system called state commissions, and with that money they are then able to support AmeriCorps members. AmeriCorps members are providing direct service in a whole range of service opportunities, everything from arts to environment, education, poverty, and others. And so those type of AmeriCorps members are distinct from AmeriCorps VISTA, which is the third stream there at the bottom right corner, in that the VISTA programs all have an anti-poverty focus in some fashion or another, and the VISTA members are doing capacity building work. So rather than providing the tutoring services, they're building the infrastructure for the tutoring program. So they're raising money, they're developing a volunteer infrastructure, recruiting volunteers, training, developing curricula, all those kinds of things. So it's more behind the scenes work, with the idea being that it's more sustainable. So once the system is built and set up, it can be self-sustaining and can continue even after the VISTA member completes their service. So that's a very quick look at the National Service Network. Now I'd like to move on and talk a little bit about our organization and your relationship to it. So we have our national office in Washington, D.C., which is where I work. We also have 47 state offices spread out throughout the country. We have a couple of states that have combined together and share a state office. And these state offices are there to help develop, manage, and monitor VISTA programs. And some of them manage large, what we call multi-state or national projects. So it's possible that your VISTA project is managed by the state office that's not the state where you're located. So it's a relatively common thing. It can create a little confusion at first if you're having to call another state for your quote-unquote your state office. But it's a way that we can sort of balance the portfolio and spread the projects around so that we can have more balance in the workload. In addition, at the state offices, the staff are there to support you in supervising your VISTAs, and they're ready to intervene when emergencies arise or if there are difficult situations, say between you and a VISTA member or between VISTA members, or if there's some unexpected thing that happens. The state office is the one that you would call to get advice and help in dealing with that. The state office are also responsible for connecting you to the resources that are most appropriate to meet your needs. So whether that's within the structure of your grant from the corporation, or if there are other types of resources that your organization or project would need, they can help identify those and make those connections. In addition to all the work that our state offices do with VISTA, they do similar types of work with the Senior Corps programs. So if your program officer is busy or is out maybe doing site visits, it could be related to VISTA, or it could be related to their work with Senior Corps. So I just want to mention that so that you realize they're busy people. They've got a lot going on. In addition, your state office can provide you with technical support. They can arrange conference calls or set up webinars if you wanted to do that regarding e-grants or recruitment, training, performance measures. So anything related to managing your project, if you want some additional technical support, they can set that up and provide that for you. They also are responsible for doing the compliance monitoring. That is the oversight of your VISTA project, because even though you may not be receiving dollars, you are receiving federal resources in the form of VISTA members, and so there is an accountability aspect to the grants management. And it's the state office that does the monitoring of your project to make sure it's in compliance with all of the expectations of the agreement and all of the terms of VISTA. And as I said earlier, they are there to support you in supervising your VISTAs. They can provide some training for your VISTA members if that would help, or if you wanted to be able to, say some of your VISTA members want to set up a conference call to talk with other VISTAs without having a supervisor present, or they want to do something outside of your organization, maybe with just all the VISTAs in their county or state, that would be outside of your project. The state office can help facilitate those types of meetings or conference calls. Now, in terms of communication, you can see that if a particular VISTA member has an issue, has a question, needs some support, their first stop is really at your door. They would check in with you as the VISTA supervisor or with somebody there within your sponsoring organization to see if there is an opportunity or if there are resources or advice, whatever it is they need, that they can get within your organization. If you're in a multi-site organization, so you've got multiple sites under an umbrella, what we call an intermediary, the VISTA member should start first with their individual site and then perhaps go up to the umbrella level, the intermediary level, if that is applicable. If they can't get what they need there, then the state office would be the next level for them to go and get support. Or you as a supervisor could go with them or on their behalf to the state office to seek that support. And if the issue can't be resolved, or if the state office doesn't have what's being requested, then the next step would be to go to VISTA headquarters, which is at the Corporation for National and Community Service. There is also, not represented in this little graphic, but there's another opportunity for support. So for VISTA members that have questions about their benefits or their living allowance, a payment, a deposit to their bank account, those kinds of questions are handled by a branch we call the VISTA Member Support Unit. And we provide them with that number. It's the same number for the National Service Hotline that you may have called for e-grants assistance. So it's all consolidated and under one phone number, but that's another avenue for that type of support. So that was sort of a quick introduction to what we're going to do today and to talk a little bit about our organization. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you Sarah Brady. Sarah is a state program specialist. She works in the Ohio State Office. She's been working with VISTA projects at the state level for 8 years, so she's got a tremendous depth of experience. She also happens to be a fabulous trainer, so we're really lucky to have Sarah with us on this session to talk more about managing your VISTA project. So take it away, Sarah.
Excellent. Thank you, Andy. So welcome, everybody. I'm very happy to be on the phone with all of you. I take pride in providing technical assistance to programs, and I think this webinar is a great opportunity to help begin setting you up for success of managing your VISTA project. With that being said, one of the most important pieces of managing your VISTA project is really understanding your roles and responsibilities, whether you are a sponsoring organization, hosting VISTA members directly with your organization, an intermediary organization like Andy mentioned before, or a sub-site that has a direct relationship with an intermediary. And so I mentioned those three terms because as I go through this PowerPoint and as I looked at the registrant list, I just want you to understand that I might use terms like sub-site organization or intermediary, and hopefully Andy's description will help you understand the layers there and where you fit into the roles and responsibilities moving forward. So the first thing that I do want to talk to you about today are your sponsor responsibilities. And as a sponsor, if you are a sponsor of the VISTA project, the items that are important for you to know is that you will be responsible for monitoring progress and collecting data as it relates to both your performance measures or milestones, whichever language your state office is communicating with you. The milestones and performance measures are what your VISTA members should be impacting while they are serving as members. With the collection and monitoring of your performance measures or milestones, at the end of every period of time, you will have to participate in submitting a program progress report, which we call a PPR, or a VISTA progress report supplement, which stands for VPR, or which also is known as a VPRS. We'll go into more detail about what these reports are a little later, but I just wanted to mention now that you should be aware that during your program cycle, you should be responsible for submitting such reports. It's also important that as a sponsor or a supervisor of your VISTA members, you understand what the VISTA members' living allowance is, for starters, and what the VISTA expectations are for VISTA, and what rules and regulations do apply to VISTA members. Additionally, as a sponsor, you'll also want to make sure that the VISTA member is understanding of your agency policies and how those policies work in relationship to the VISTA policies and how they apply to the VISTA member while the VISTA member is serving at your organization. And in relationship to the understanding the expectations and the living allowances of VISTA members, there is a TCB course, or Terms, Conditions, and Benefits course, that all of you have access to that will help you understand all of the VISTA members' terms, conditions, and benefits for their term of service. And that you should have access to through the VISTA campus. But I don't want to digress too much into those details. Just understand that there are resources available to you so that you can understand what the expectations are for your VISTA members as developed and designed by the corporation, so that you can in turn relate those to your VISTA members directly. There are other sponsor responsibilities that I do want to go through briefly. The first is you are responsible for orienting and training your VISTA members directly at your program site. We do provide the pre-service orientation to your VISTA members. However, that is a general big picture of VISTA, and it does in fact go into a little more detail about the VISTA assignment description and focuses on some aspects of each individual VISTA member's assignments, but the orientation and training that is going to be very specific to your site needs to be provided by your organization. And we'll go into more details about a required training called an OnSite Orientation later on in these slides, which is an orientation that you have to provide to your VISTA members when they first become to your placement site. Additionally, it's your responsibility as a sponsor to provide administrative support. And so what we mean by administrative support is providing space and supplies and the appropriate equipment that a VISTA member needs to appropriately complete their assignment during their service term. And so you'll want to do an assessment of what is necessary for your VISTA member and make sure that that is available to them when they come to your service site to begin service, so they know how to access all of those administrative pieces that will help make them successful during their service term. As sponsors, you're also responsible for supervision, monitoring attendance and use of leave days for your VISTA members, service-related transportation, another report that's submitted bi-weekly, which is a sponsor verification form, and emergency funds advance if required. And so just to give you a little more detail about each of these items, at your sponsor orientation or supervisor orientation that you'll be attending in a couple of weeks, they will talk to you about supervision and how to best manage your VISTA members. So I won't go into details there, but some of the best relationships that we have seen with VISTA members are those in which the supervisor is both acting as a supervisor and a coach. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail about that because you will receive a lot of more in-depth training about that topic later on. In regards to monitoring attendance and use of leave days, all of you will learn or have learned that a VISTA member's term of service comes with conditions and benefits, and some of those benefits include leave time for VISTA members. As sponsors, it's your responsibility to maintain and manage an account of the leave days that VISTA members are taking during their service term, because we can't have VISTA members exceeding the allowable amount of days that we do provide to them. As far as service-related transportation and sponsor verification forms and emergency fund advance, all of these items are mentioned in your memorandum of agreement. And the memorandum of agreement is an agreement that we have directly with you from the state office to the sponsor. And that memorandum of agreement requires you to be able to advance your VISTA members up to $500 for emergency situations if in fact the state office isn't available. It also requires you to submit a sponsor verification form. This sponsor verification form directly relates to monitoring attendance and leave days of members. So the sponsor verification form is where you're going to indicate bi-weekly that all of your VISTA members are on board and in fact serving. The only way you can ensure that the sponsor verification report is accurate is by having some monitoring process for looking at leave days of members to make sure they haven't exceeded their leave days. So hopefully your state office will provide you more detailed webinars or technical assistance on how to accurately complete your sponsor verification report. But if you haven't heard of that report, you certainly will, and we'll certainly have an opportunity to learn more about that at this supervisor orientation that you'll attend in a few weeks during an e-grant session. And then the last thing that I want to go into a little more detail about is the service-related transportation. The service-related transportation, this is in your memorandum of agreement, and it states that if your VISTA members are going to be doing service-related assignments that require them to do some transportation going to and from meetings, they should be provided reimbursement. And that reimbursement will be provided to the VISTA members for their expenses that they incur for any service-related assignments. This does not include commuting to and from your service site. So I want you to keep that in mind so when you are considering how you are going to go about providing reimbursement for VISTA members who are doing service-related travel. To continue with the sponsor responsibilities, we also want you to understand that when we're giving you the VISTA resource, we understand that community members are really interested in what type of federal supports are in their communities. And with that being said, because VISTA is a federal resource, we would like to make sure that VISTA members are highly visible and AmeriCorps is highly visible when you are promoting your VISTA project or talking about your VISTA accomplishments. With that being said, It's important that we have you spreading the word about our programs through using websites, blogs, or social media. Let people know that when an accomplishment happens and it's a result of the VISTA member, that you place that on your website and blog within the announcements about those special accomplishments. Also, in your print and any publicity you do through broadcast, it's very important that you recognize VISTA and let the community know that VISTA members are involved in making the changes that your organization is working on through their service for their year period of time. Also, if you are going to be providing your members with business cards, and when you have your members attending public meetings and conferences, it's important that they are given the opportunity to represent VISTA and state that they are serving with VISTA. One of the wonderful things about your VISTA members' pre-service orientation is at their pre-service orientation, their facilitators specifically talk to them about how to provide a quick elevator speech and how to introduce themselves while representing your organization and VISTA across the board. So encourage that when your VISTA members are attending meetings or conferences. Moving on, in regards to VISTA sponsor responsibilities, we have under roles and responsibilities, we have this slide specifically focused on VISTAs and housing. Now, I want to be very clear that as a sponsor, you are not required to provide your VISTA members housing during their service terms. But it is always helpful if you are assisting VISTA members with housing. Meaning, if you have resources or community members or your board of directors, if they have leads on affordable or housing opportunities for VISTA members, we do ask that you inform your VISTA members, especially those who are relocating for service, as to where they can access affordable housing or housing that may be subsidized by your board or your organization. VISTA members are permitted to relocate during their service, and in some instances are permitted to relocate prior to their pre-service orientation and before they start service. However, not all VISTA members are given the authority to relocate prior to their service, so it's extremely important that you are in understanding and know your VISTA member status before they come to your organization. So if they do show up at your organization and relocated through pre-service orientation, it's helpful if you can help the VISTA member or allow them for some time in searching for housing and settling into their service site. And if you have the ability, offer temporary housing to the VISTA member until they're able to find stable housing for their entire service term. Moving forward, we're now going to talk a little bit about the on-site orientation. Earlier in the presentation, I was talking about your sponsor responsibilities. And one of the sponsor responsibilities that you have as sponsors is providing an on-site orientation to your VISTA members. And this on-site orientation should be implemented beginning when the VISTA member arrives on-site after their pre-service orientation. In general, a VISTA member attends pre-service orientation for 4 days, and the day immediately following their PSO or the next business day immediately following their PSO, VISTA members should appear at your service site for their first day of service. The on-site orientation plan is the opportunity that you have to provide your VISTA members information to have success during their VISTA project. You will be going into on-site orientation, or you will be provided on-site orientation training during your supervisor orientation, in which the facilitators will go into depth on what you will best meet the needs of your VISTA members. That will be on day 4 of your orientation, so plan to learn more about the on-site orientation in person at your supervisor orientation in a few weeks. What I do want to do is take a moment and pause for questions before we move on to talk about the members' terms, conditions, and benefits.
Great.
And
so
if you wouldn't, oh, go ahead, Andy.
Yep, I was going to say, so if anyone would like to ask a question, there is the Q&A feature within WebEx. If you don't see the Q&A block in the lower right corner, then look in the upper right corner, you'll see a tab marked Q&A. If you click that, it'll open the Q&A block. Type your question and press the Enter key. It'll be sent to us, and we can handle those. And also, if you'd like to ask a question by phone, raise your hand, and you can raise your hand by, you see the little icon that looks like a hand just under the names in the participants block. So the participants block in the upper right corner of the screen, you'll see a list of the presenters, and just below that is a hand. Raise your hand, and we will then call on you and open up your phone line. And Sarah, we have the first question, which comes from Sarah Schmidt, and she says, will this PowerPoint be available to us after the webinar? And the answer to that is yes. So we will provide that now that you've attended. We've got your email address, and so we will be sending that out to you as well.
And we'll just give it another few seconds before we move forward if anybody has questions that pop in.
Right. So there was another, Sarah, you mentioned the 4th day of supervisor orientation, and Sarah Schmidt is right. We've just revised the schedule, so we've streamlined it into 3 days. So this is what Sarah Brady was talking about, the training on on-site orientation and training for your members. That now happens on the 3rd day. So this is it's a recent change, and that's why, in fact, we're doing this webinar to make space so that when you're together with the others, you can really focus on topics related to managing your members, and on-site orientation and training is one of those topics.
Thanks for that clarification. I see another question, Andy, that popped in, and the question is, are there any resources you recommend for connecting our VISTAs with housing? Craigslist, or would the state office have sources that have worked for previous VISTAs? Excuse me. And my quick answer to that, and maybe Andy, you have more details. Craigslist obviously is always a resource that's out there and VISTA members use. I do know that every state office has a different capacity around their understanding of housing-related issues in various regions within their state. And if they have housing resources, they would certainly be happy to connect you with those. However, we don't necessarily all have that at our fingertips. So we might refer you to other organizations that have specialized housing resources. So I know that doesn't answer your question, Jennifer, but I would really encourage you to just reach out to your state office because they may have a way to help connect your VISTA member even with other VISTA members who are going to be moving to the area and may be searching for housing as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. And just to add a little bit to that, on the VISTA campus, which you'll be learning about a lot more detail when you go to Supervisors Orientation, the VISTA campus section for VISTA members includes several discussion forums, and there's one around, it's called Housing in the Dollar Store, Recipes Housing in the Dollar Store, and also one called Your First 30 Days. So a couple of discussions, particularly around for new VISTA members and around issues related to housing and stretching a budget. So we do see a lot of folks there looking for housing and sharing tips and ideas. Also, connecting your incoming VISTAs with other VISTAs is a great idea because they will know a lot about the housing market, and from their own search they'll know perhaps areas to avoid or places to look that were promising. And it's a great experience if VISTAs can room together, and we see that happening a lot. And maybe as one VISTA member is finishing up a term of service, the new VISTA coming on can take his or her place in the group house and sort of keep the VISTA house together, and also make it easier for the incoming VISTA to find a housing resource. And I see Amy has posted a link in the chat that takes you right to one of the forums on the VISTA campus. All right, so I don't see any other questions right now, and I'm not seeing any raised hands. So Sarah, I think we'll go back to you.
Excellent. All right, well, thank you for those questions. We're now going to change topics a little bit, and we're going to talk about the member terms, conditions, and benefits. And oftentimes, just from my experience in the state office, I can tell you sponsors and supervisors are curious as to what their role is in understanding the members' terms, conditions, and benefits. And as Andy pointed out with a visual several slides ago, when a VISTA member has any issues or questions, the first point of contact that they typically take is directly with their supervisors. And so it's important for you to know the VISTA members' terms, conditions, and benefits, because you will be the first line of support for your members. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive into the VISTA member terms, conditions, and benefits, and I will start by addressing some member issues. And then later we will talk about where you can access more information about members' terms, conditions, and benefits. So the first thing I would like to talk about specifically are prohibited activities for VISTA members. There are policies related to VISTA members participating in outside employment, political activity, religious activity, education during their VISTA member service term. There are also some policies with VISTA as it relates to VISTA members having criminal activity during their service term and VISTA members' time and attendance. And we bring these items up because it's important for you to know that as sponsors, when you are working with your VISTA members, you cannot have them participating in political or religious activities as part of their VISTA assignment. And so that is one term that is very pertinent to the VISTA sponsor and the VISTA supervisor's role. It's important for you to understand that members can't participate in these activities, so you're not necessarily assigning them to the VISTA member. With that being said, there's also a restriction around VISTA members having employment outside of their VISTA service term. When a VISTA member signs up to serve as a member, they're stating that they're willing to serve for 365 days at your organization, and that they'll be available for service 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, essentially. And so that does restrict their employment outside of their service term. VISTA members can take educational classes, but there are some policies related to that as well. And that is because the VISTA member needs to be available to you at any given time, you should be aware that a VISTA member, although they may participate in educational classes during their term of service, those educational classes should not interfere with their VISTA term of service. We did talk about time and attendance earlier and the necessity for you to collect leave time of your VISTA members, and so I'll leave it at that, but all state offices have some best practices as it relates to tracking leave time for VISTA members. So if you have questions about the best practice that your state office recommends for collecting time and attendance, I'd certainly encourage you to reach out to them, as they'll be the programs that are doing the staff members who will be doing the monitoring and oversight of your program, and understanding what they feel are best practices will certainly help you if at any point during your sponsorship of the VISTA project you are monitored. And then we also have a policy and as it relates to criminal activity of VISTA members during their service term. I don't want to go into detail about that because every single instance of criminal activity of a VISTA member during their service term is evaluated on its own merit and in its own circumstance. And so if ever you have an instance where a VISTA member has participated in criminal activity during their service term, you should be aware that you should be contacting your state office immediately. Additionally, during a VISTA member service term, it's important for you to know that VISTA members don't always successfully complete their service term, whether it's of their own volition because they are resigning from service because it's just simply not the right fit for them, or whether it's because the VISTA member, from your perspective, is not a right fit for any given reason. The things that are important for you to know about early terminations or resignations of VISTA members is if you have a VISTA member who is resigning from service, you should be in contact with your state office immediately so that your state office can take proper actions to remove the VISTA member from our roles, and so we're not paying VISTA members for time that's not served. If you're in a situation where you have a VISTA member who is participating in activities that are adversely affecting your VISTA member's service term or your organization, you are able and welcome to request the removal of a VISTA member from your VISTA project. Now, here are the things that I want to be very clear about. You can request the removal of a VISTA member from your project. However, you as sponsors are not authorized to remove the VISTA from your program. The state office has to be involved in any circumstance that involves removing a VISTA member from a project or program, or from the VISTA or from VISTA overall. And I state this because if you have a VISTA member who in fact needs to be removed because they're violating your agency's policies or VISTA policies, it's important that you understand the very specific steps for removing a VISTA member from your project. Now, there are some resources out there for you in the handbook as it relates to specific steps for removing a VISTA member from your project. But there should be no time when you are telling a VISTA member that they're fired or removed from the project. The state office should be having that type of communication with the VISTA member directly. The important thing to know about removing VISTA members is it is a complicated process. And so the state office should be always contacted before you take any steps, because oftentimes these circumstances do need to follow a legal process and can include our general counsel from participating in the removal process. So if you're documenting or you have any specific management processes that you follow for staff as it relates to removing them from your organization, I would encourage you to consider using those same documentation processes or those management practices that you know and are familiar with when going through the process of correcting any actions from the VISTA member. But the bottom line and the first rule of thumb is you'll always want to call the state office if ever you have challenges with the VISTA member during their service term. The last topic on the slide has to do with nepotism. And nepotism is a factor with VISTA. It's important for you to know that VISTA members cannot hold a position if their family member provides any supervisory authority over the person who's serving. So a VISTA member cannot be serving at an organization where a family member is the supervisor. Also, if a VISTA member is a family member of an individual in a state office, meaning like myself, I work here in Ohio. If I had a brother, or if my brother wanted to serve as a VISTA member, he could not serve as a VISTA member with any program grant that I oversee. And so these are items that we want you to be aware of so that we don't have circumstances of nepotism at any of our placement sites.
And Sarah, this is Andy. Before we move on, we did have a question come in. If you could just review again the guidance around education. So if VISTA members want to attend college courses, what are some of the parameters that they need to keep in mind? Sure.
So in regards to education of VISTA members, the parameters that you need to keep in mind is that if a VISTA member wants to take educational classes during their service term, it needs to be approved by their supervisor/sponsor. So you'll want to make sure that you have some written documentation that the educational classes are actually approved and you have that documentation on site at your organization. The state office does not need to be involved in approving educational courses. However, here's the caveat, and I'm going to go back to this same language. A VISTA member cannot take educational classes that are going to interfere with their service. So we often get a lot of questions about conferences or maybe an Excel course that's offered 1 day a week for 3 weeks by the community to teach the member how to use Excel. Those are circumstances in which those courses are not necessarily credit-driven courses, and they're for professional development, and they're one-time or three-time things. So those wouldn't need approval. Any credit courses for like university or college courses do need approval by you for a VISTA member to participate in. Now, if you have any concern about the educational class negatively impacting or pulling the VISTA member away from the service term, let's say a VISTA member is requesting to take an educational class from 1 to 3:30 every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, that would be interfering with the VISTA member's service term, and so that shouldn't be approved. And I would say in those circumstances, I would reach out to the state office and ask them to help you provide that message to the VISTA member. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that's great. I recognize this slide is a little confusing because education shows up under prohibited actions. And of course, education itself isn't prohibited, it's just, it requires approval. And Sarah Schmidt says thanks. So I guess we did answer.
Perfect. Well, Sarah, if you have more questions, feel free to type them in. We will certainly get to those. So in speaking about the VISTA member benefits, terms, conditions, and benefits, it's important for you to know about some resources that are available to VISTA members during their service term. As Andy mentioned before, there was a visual earlier in which he was talking about the VISTA member support unit. The VISTA member support unit is one of the most critical pieces to a VISTA member's service term. The VISTA member support unit makes sure VISTA members get paid and their benefits are up to date and provided to the member. The VISTA member support unit should be contacted by the sponsor or the VISTA in circumstances where a VISTA may not have been paid or a VISTA member can't access their health benefits or haven't received their health benefit card. The VMSU is what we call it in short, is certainly there to provide assistance. The VISTA member support unit can be contacted through our national service hotline, and we provide that phone number here on the screen. This is a number that I would encourage you all to have written down, because if your VISTA member does have any specific questions about their benefits, while the state office is certainly here and available to assist in getting those questions answered, we often refer benefit questions directly to the VISTA member support unit because they're the ones most qualified and have the best knowledge around the benefits and the up-to-date information on benefits at any given time during your VISTA member's service term. Now, if your VISTA members have any issues and they contact the VISTA member support unit and their issues happen to be related to the project, meaning they have questions about their assignment or their role, the VISTA members will be contacting the state office. So in brief, you'll see here that the VISTA member support unit works on and provides plenty of expertise around end-of-service benefits, service letters, travel reimbursements or emergencies. And when we talk travel reimbursements, we mean for relocation or attending pre-service orientation. They help with navigating the VISTA members' child care and health care benefits, and they are also the collectors of the W-4 direct deposit and life insurance information, which is why they should be the first contact as it relates to any pay-related issues. So the other thing that I do want to note is although we encourage members to contact the VISTA member support unit with child care and health benefit plan questions, in some circumstances the VISTA member support unit will refer those questions off to our contractors who manage both of those benefits. So moving on, just a few more slides in the member terms, conditions, and benefits here. Before we move on to reporting, I do want to mention the living allowance. VISTA members who are serving in a standard capacity, meaning your organization does not have an operational grant, those members are paid directly by VISTA headquarters through direct deposit. All VISTA members will have access to their direct deposit entry information and for any of their W-2 or 1099 forms directly on their My AmeriCorps portal. And the My AmeriCorps portal is where they've all applied for their VISTA service term. So if VISTA members are asking for any of those resources like their W-2 or they need a pay stub, they should be referred to the My AmeriCorps portal. It is important to know if you are a program grant and you're an intermediary with a program grant or a subsite with a program grant, your VISTA members will want to communicate directly with that program grant sponsor so that they can receive their W-2 and their 1099, because those VISTA members will be paid directly by their sponsor. We also want to mention that VISTA members are eligible for income disregard, which means that during their service term, they will be able to, if they were receiving public benefits prior to becoming VISTA members, their benefits cannot be terminated or reduced as a result of their VISTA member service. If a VISTA member needs an income disregard letter or classification, they can contact the VMSU. This is another VMSU support area, and specifically within the service letters, they can access those service letters. The last thing that I do want to mention about living allowances that's not on the slide is I've recently staffed a couple of pre-service orientations that VISTA members have attended, in which I have VISTA members walking up to me during the training asking what their VISTA member living allowance will be during their service term. That number should be available to you by your state office. And if you don't have that living allowance amount that a VISTA will be making on a monthly basis, I'd encourage you all to reach out to your state office and learn what that is so you can inform your VISTA members of that benefit during their service term or before they're recruited. And now I'm going to move on to health care. This is a hot topic, and so just bear with me as we move through the health care information. Our health care that we provide to VISTA members is a limited health care plan. It is not insurance. The plan is, as you'll see on the screen, designed to reduce out-of-pocket costs for VISTA members. It is a benefit that is free for VISTA members, It only covers the VISTA member and does not cover the family of a VISTA member. It is not full major medical coverage. And the last bullet point here is that it's administered by 7 Corners. Now, the things that are important to know is that, as I mentioned, VISTA members do not pay for this benefit. It is free to members, so they don't have a premium to access this benefit, and they are automatically enrolled into our health coverage plan. This plan provides access to health care that makes it possible for the member to have minimal expenses during their service term. And we mention this because on the next slide we'll talk about how our health care coverage interacts with the Affordable Care Act. But a couple of things to know is that for our VISTA members to receive this health care benefit, they receive it the day they begin their service. So there is no application period because it is provided directly to members immediately. The copays for the members are very, very limited. For example, $5 is the cost of a copay for a medical visit, and often for prescriptions. And oftentimes there is no copay for prescriptions that are generics. The VISTA members also have access to care like OB/GYN exams or immunizations or any essential screenings and approved medications. So there is no annual or lifetime limits on the coverage. But again, this does interact with the Affordable Care Act in a very interesting way. Now, what I do want to point out is that we do have resources very specific to healthcare on the VISTA campus that's linked here on the screen. And so I would encourage you to have all of your VISTA members read through any information around the healthcare benefit. And the reason is healthcare and the Affordable Care Act gets slightly confusing for VISTA members. The health coverage plan that we provide from the Corporation for National and Community Service does not meet the minimum requirement of the Affordable Care Act, meaning the Affordable Care Act, as you know, requires that all health care plans cover pre-existing conditions. Well, the VISTA health plan is not insurance, and so we do not cover pre-existing conditions. And so VISTA members can be eligible and could be able to purchase health coverage through the marketplace, healthcare.gov. And so we bring this up because there are a few key notes as our health coverage relates with the Affordable Care Act. Number one, there are additional coverage options. So if the VISTA member wants to ensure that they have full coverage of all their pre-existing conditions, they should consider either being part of a family plan through their parents or spouse or partner for health insurance outside of our health coverage plan. They may want to purchase insurance through the marketplace, and when they enroll in VISTA, they have a 60-day period in which they have an open enrollment period for their VISTA, for the marketplace to purchase additional insurance, or they may be able to apply for Medicaid, Medicare, or TRICARE. Now, the insurance through the marketplace can obviously be accessed at healthcare.gov, and the Medicare and Medicaid also they can determine their eligibility through healthcare.gov. So that's really going to be the first stopping point for any VISTA member who's looking for additional coverage if in fact they can't receive that coverage through their family members. Now here are a couple of things to note. VISTA members for the 2014 calendar year can receive an exemption for meeting the minimum requirement for the Affordable Care Act. And so that means that they through VISTA, can benefit from not having the penalty fee if they do not purchase into the marketplace this year. Now, before the question comes up, I do want to address it. We know that that is true for 2014. We do not know if that's true for 2015. So I just want to be upfront with you. The thing to know is that as a sponsor, you can help with health coverage if you wanted to provide or allow your member to enroll in your health care benefit at your organization. You are welcome to allow for that and to enroll the VISTA member in your health care benefit at your organization. However, at no point can a VISTA member be identified as an employee of your organization. And so you'll need to be sure that if you are going to go through that option, you are not identifying the VISTA member as an employee. Also, if you want to help offset health care costs for a VISTA member, you are also welcome to provide reimbursement for the benefit to the member. But we'll talk about at a certain point, actually on the next slide, about how you can help a VISTA member. Because cash cannot be transfer hands between you and your VISTA member, it's extremely important that you know that it's important that you know that this is a reimbursement process rather than pay the member up front for helping them with their plan. The health care information is very complex. And as I mentioned before, there are a lot of resources on the VISTA campus that will walk you through the health coverage plan and how it relates to the Affordable Care Act. And so I just want to refer you to that again if you have additional questions. I do see a question come up in the plan. Andy, did you have something to add before I go to this question?
Well, I was just gonna point out this question, and I'm happy to handle it if you'd like.
Sure.
So Jennifer says, could you explain the philosophy behind making the health care plan for VISTA limited and not full insurance? Is it simply a fiscal constraint, or is it something else? So it's two things. One, before the Affordable Care Act went into full implementation, we already were under contract with our current health care provider, and so we had to honor that contract. And then when it became known that VISTA members, all of the details about what the requirements were going to be and how they would apply to VISTA, because certainly the law was in place, but there had been a lot of questions and uncertainty about how it would be applied to VISTA members. So, anyway, the law went into effect. We already had this contract, and so we're working through the rest of the terms of that contract. We are looking now for a new contract to provide, broader coverage and more compliant coverage. So it's very complicated. I don't understand all of the details in the Affordable Care Act, but just to let you know that we are looking at for next year, for 2015, we're looking at sort of a different approach to this. And as we have more information available, we'll be sharing that out with all of you and all of our sponsors.
Thanks, Andy, for taking that question. I appreciate it. So, okay, so we covered the Health Care and the Affordable Care Act, and I'm sure there are a lot of lingering questions out there about the topic, so feel free to keep popping them in. But in the interest of time, I'm going to keep charging forward so we can get to the reporting piece as well. In regards to the member benefits, terms, conditions, and benefits, a lot of sponsors have a deep interest in helping their VISTA members. And so there are a lot of restrictions on what you can do for VISTA members as a sponsor. And so we just want to highlight a couple of items. If you want to assist your VISTA member with any number of items, we have specific guidance for a lot of those items that you assist your VISTA members with. For instance, you can help your VISTA member with housing expenses. And if you wanted to help your VISTA member with housing expenses, you can either help them with subsidized housing, you may subsidize housing. So that is one way to assist your VISTA members with their expenses during their service term. In regards to providing your VISTA members with food and gifts, there is restrictions on VISTA members receiving food and gifts from their sponsor. It's important to note that these items should only be provided to VISTA members in very special circumstances like birthdays, recognition, or holidays. And they do need to be provided to all VISTA members, and they cannot be given to only VISTA members. If these benefits are provided to staff, then you can provide them to VISTA members. So examples might be a bag of groceries or some clothing or promotional items of your organization. You are welcome to provide those to your members as long as it's applied across the board to all members and staff at your organization. The big no-no with helping your VISTA members is money. Your VISTA members cannot be provided any cash, gift cards, gas cards. They cannot be given to a VISTA member on a regular basis. The gift cards and gas cards or meal cards can be provided on special occasions if everybody else in your agency receives them. But if they don't all receive them, everybody in your organization, it cannot be provided to only the VISTA members. So I think the bottom point here on this slide, be fair and equitable and support to all your VISTA members serving with you, that needs to be applied and understood. That also kind of extends to staff. If you're going to be providing your VISTA members or your staff with food or gifts, you can do that with your members as well. The bottom line is no money can pass hands. The thing about health insurance is, as I mentioned before, you can provide your VISTA members with health insurance, but you cannot identify them as employees of your organization. And then lastly, as far as helping your VISTA members, we always encourage you to provide your VISTA members with training or engage them in training opportunities that your organization has with even partnering organizations. Let the VISTA members participate so that they can certainly develop their skills. The last slide within this section is about VISTA leaders.
Sorry, Sarah, before we move on, we did have a question come in just around supporting VISTAs. And Misty asks, are meal plans provided through our educational institution allowable? So I'm guessing maybe she's at a university or a campus. So could they enroll their VISTAs in the meal plan and they can just go to the dining hall and have their meals?
That again, it comes down to, is it applied to all staff? And is it applied across the board to all VISTA members? And so the answer would be you would have to take a closer look at whether it is something that is provided to everybody. And if it is, you can certainly provide it to VISTA members. For that particular question, though, I'd highly recommend you reach out to your state office so that you can they can help you understand whether how you are applying that rule is actually accurate and adequate.
Great, thank you.
All right, so moving on to talk a little bit about VISTA leaders. The VISTA leaders are participants of the VISTA program, and they serve with organizations that have 6 or more VISTA members serving at the organization or within the project. Leaders can help with things like recruitment, mentoring, training, coordinating, reports, writing. They cannot do your program reporting, which we're going to talk about in just a few minutes, but they can help with coordinating your reports for VISTA. And generally, the VISTA members act as a liaison between the VISTA members and your organization, so they can help the VISTA members understand how to navigate or how to manage their term of service. They can also help develop professional development opportunities for your VISTA member. And so If you have a project that has 6 or more VISTA members and you don't currently have a VISTA leader at your organization, it might be worth talking to your state office about to consider having a leader, because they can assist in many ways during a VISTA member's project and service term. And so I just want to open it up for questions and answers. I'm seeing we only have 15 minutes left, and I do have quite a bit of information to get through, so we'll give it a minute or a few seconds to see if any questions come in. Again, you can raise your hand, and if you want to ask your question over the phone, or you can type your question into the question and answer section, and we'll certainly pick those up and answer them.
And Sarah, we did have a question that came in when folks registered for the webinar, and that is someone was curious about how the role of the supervisor differs from the role of the VISTA leader. And I'll just say that when you go to your supervisor orientation, you'll receive a workbook. And in the back, there, I think, are 4 or 5 pages that talk much more detail about the role of the VISTA leader, and there's a comparison, and it shows, say, around recruitment and selecting VISTA members, what the leader can do and what the supervisor can do, and likewise around reporting and lots of other roles. So just know that you'll be getting that information when you go to training.
And so, Andy, I saw another question pop up that I do want to address. And the question is, are we able to encourage VISTA members to sign up for SNAP benefits? And the answer to that question is no. You cannot encourage your VISTA members or require your VISTA members to apply for or sign up for SNAP benefits. You can tell your VISTA members that SNAP benefits exist and they may qualify for those benefits, but you cannot advertise them as an additional benefit for serving as a VISTA member, or force or make somebody apply for that particular benefit. Additionally, something that I forgot to address on a previous slide, and that had to do with member benefits. If you're talking about any member benefits in like an advertisement for the position, we ask that you link VISTA members to our pages as it relates to what benefits are available to VISTA, so link them directly to the corporation's website, because we don't want to have any unclear messages going out as to what is available for VISTA members as it relates to our benefits. And again, I do want to mention that you can let the members know that they could potentially be eligible for benefits, but certainly not push them in that direction. So hopefully that answers that question.
And it looks like it did.
Perfect. That's great. So the last thing I'm going to go through is reporting. I'm going to try and keep this as brief as possible because, Andy, we certainly want to get to your next steps. In interest of time, we have 15 minutes. We'll certainly watch for questions and answer those along the way. But please bear with me as I move through the rest of this information fairly quickly. So as VISTA sponsors, you are required to do some reporting. And so we're going to focus on reporting here very briefly. And I want to mention that all of this information on reporting, it's important that you know that you will likely be submitting most of these reports in the eGrants system, which is where you applied for your VISTA resource. And understanding that, please know that you will get more training at your supervisor orientation and a walkthrough of the eGrants system. And so we're not going to focus on that today, but instead just focus on what all of these reports entail and what they mean. So the first thing, as I mentioned earlier in this presentation, is on a bi-weekly basis, you as sponsors will be identifying all of the VISTA members and stating whether all of your VISTA members are on board and serving with your organization. And you do this through a bi-weekly email, a bi-weekly sponsor verification report that is submitted in eGrants. You'll receive an email directly from our system expressing to you how you can access the sponsor verification form. You review that report and submit it to us and identify if anybody is not, in fact, serving at your organization, and we will then take appropriate action for those VISTA members. It should be noted that we do provide instructions on how to submit this report on the VISTA campus and in the supervisor manual. So pay close attention to that because you can get detailed information on the biweekly verification report. Other reports that we do require include the project progress report and a progress report, the VISTA progress report supplement. The first thing I'll focus on is the VISTA project report. The VISTA progress report is the progress report in which you're going to outline the accomplishments, or the term we like to use as milestones, of your overall VISTA project. It's also where you'll provide narratives that will provide qualitative data or qualitative information rather than quantitative as to what your project accomplishments overall are. But you want to be very, very familiar with your project plan so that you understand what in fact your outcomes you identified when you submitted an application to us, because those are the outcomes we're going to very specifically ask you to report out on. So we also ask that you submit any information as it relates to press coverage or newsletters, maybe curriculum that's developed, anything that you are sending out where you are recognizing the VISTA members or based on the VISTA members' accomplishments, because we do like to have those available for future reporting with the corporation or with our headquarter offices. With that being said, project progress reporting periods vary. And so in your first year of sponsorship of a VISTA project, you should all be expected to report out on a quarterly basis of your VISTA project. Now what I want to be clear about is this project period cover date and date report is due. This is very variable, or it has many variables, and so your project periods and your report due date periods may look extremely different than what you see right here. This is just a sampling of what a project period could look like during your reporting years. So in your first year, you'll be asked to submit a progress report on a quarterly basis, and in subsequent years, you will likely submit semi-annual reports. And that's at the discretion of your state office, so you'll want to communicate with them to understand what their expectations are as far as reporting is concerned. In regards to the VISTA Progress Report Supplement, this is a report that's also submitted through eGrants, and this focuses on more demographic data as it relates to your VISTA project. And this is a report in which you'll aggregate information about the accomplishments of your VISTA member, and you'll collect that information and you'll report that to us directly. The VISTA Progress Report Supplement focuses on the performance measures based on your VISTA members' capacity building activities. And so we provide you a definition of capacity building and how we define capacity building. You can all read through that, but the idea is in the VISTA Progress Report Supplement, we're really going to be focused on looking at those capacity building activities. So items we'll be asking to collect in your VISTA Progress Report Supplement could include number of volunteers who are receiving training as a result of your VISTA members' efforts, number of community volunteers recruited and or managed. We might even be asking for hours of service contributed by community volunteers or dollar value of cash or in-kind resources leveraged. The thing to note about any of these items, we will provide you with definitions on the Progress Report Supplement screens that define these terms so that you are reporting the correct numbers to us. Now this next slide is a little confusing and I want to explain it, so bear with me as I go into just a little more detail about this. The VISTA Progress Report Supplement is due on an annual basis. It's due every year on October 31st for the previous fiscal year. When we say fiscal year, we're talking federal government fiscal year, which is October 1 to September 30. Now you know that your grant may have started in April, and we're asking you to report out on a period between October 1 to September 30. So it's very important that you are able to track information so that you can see it on a monthly basis, because the VISTA Progress Report Supplement, although your program year might be April to April, we're still going to ask you to report out on this information from October to September. Your state office will be able to help you determine what will be collected and probably help you with establishment of tracking tools to collect this data. So in very, very brief, and I went through this information very quickly and I apologize for that, but your state offices can certainly provide you more details on these items. In very brief, progress reports, program progress reports are submitted quarterly and later semi-annually. They report the accomplishments of the overall project. VPRSs are submitted annually, and they report out on CNCS performance measures specifically around the capacity building activities. Now, a few other items that you'll want to know about in regards to reporting. The state office encourages informal communication. We are here to provide technical assistance and advise you through your VISTA service term. So it's extremely important that you understand that you should be emailing us, and we're happy to help you at any given time. You can communicate with us through individual state pages on the VISTA campus or by phone. With that being said, there are some circumstances in which state offices will be asking you to submit a monthly questionnaire, because we report monthly to headquarters on your overall program accomplishments. So we might ask you to fill out a monthly questionnaire of your overall accomplishments, and that's something that might come through email format. So watch for that type of communication from your state office. And then lastly, as it relates to reporting, the state office will conduct with you site visits or monitoring visits. Site visits are typically informal visits, typically to provide technical assistance or sometimes to take headquarters staff out to visit your program. For instance, Andy King was in Ohio last summer, and I took him to visit a summer feeding site for one of our VISTA Summer Associate projects, just so he could see and be immersed in the field. Compliance visits are more formal, and they're scheduled in advance, and these take form of interviews with project staff, VISTA members, reviewing documentation and procedures for your project to make sure everything is accomplished appropriately. And you will receive a formal letter for the compliance visit both before and after, identifying what the state office will review and what the overall, what the state office will review and what the ultimate findings were. So I know I cruised through reporting information, but I do want to take a moment and see if any questions pop up before I hand it over to Andy to talk about next steps. We'll give it just a moment here. Oh, so somebody just asked, where can we find sample reports? And sample reports, I'm assuming you mean instructions on how to complete the reports. Those can be found. Andy, I don't know that they're on the VISTA campus, but I do know that they are on the National Service Network.
Mm-hmm. There is a place on the VISTA campus, which you'll be going more detail when you're at supervisor orientation, but in the supervisors area, there's a section called Life as a Supervisor, and it looks like a desktop. And right in the middle is a link to a section called Roles and Responsibilities. And within there, you'll see reporting as one of the roles and responsibilities for supervisors. And inside there is essentially a template for the VISTA project report. So you can download that. It's a Word document. You can download it. And then, as you're going through month by month, you can start filling in some of the narratives and some of the milestones that you've reached. And then when it comes time to do the reporting and e-grants, it's just a matter of copying and pasting the content into e-grants. So that's how we recommend that you do it. Okay, and then I see another question that popped up.
do monitoring compliance visits happen for everyone or just certain selected organizations? And the answer to this is every year state offices do a monitoring assessment that determines which programs we do go to visit. And so your state office will let you know after they do the monitoring assessment whether your project has been selected for a monitoring visit. So we don't go to everyone, so hopefully that answers your question. All right, well, thank you for those great questions. I'm now going to hand it over to Andy. I'm sorry, Andy, I took so much time, but Andy will now go through your next steps.
No worries. We have plenty of time because this part is brief. Thank you, Sarah, for so much great information. And just to let everyone know, of course, you'll be not necessarily with Sarah, but definitely with expert folks from a local state office at the training you attend in just the next couple of weeks. So I do want to just remind everyone that you're now completing the first step of your supervisor onboarding. From here, you'll go to the face-to-face supervisor orientation, either in Boston or Chicago, and you can see the dates there. And we will have staff members from headquarters as well as from a state office there. They can drill down and answer questions that come up that we couldn't get to today. And in preparation for your trip to orientation, we want you to do a couple of things, and that is visit the VISTA campus. Go to vistacampus.gov and click on the supervisors section, and at the bottom you'll see top resources, and there's, I think it's number 2 on the list, going to orientation. And if you click on that resource there, that link, it'll give you a few things to read before you come. So one is a welcome packet. Again, it kind of gives you the information, the structure of what's going to happen at orientation and some of the things to do before you get there. And then what we call TCBs, which is a terms, conditions, and benefits. We gave you a highlight of it, but there is a course for supervisors, and then there are some reference materials, again, that you can download from the VISTA campus that give you some key points. So if questions come up from your members or you need to guide them, you'll have that at the ready. And then in terms of what to bring, we really encourage you to bring a laptop or a tablet with you to supervisor orientation. We'll have Wi-Fi in the training room, and we're going to do a lot of stuff online. So we're going to direct you to go to the campus and direct you into e-grants. So you'll want to bring your campus login, make sure you know what your password is, both for the VISTA campus and for e-grants. So you'll be able to fully participate. We also ask that you bring the VISTA assignment descriptions, what we call the VAD, for your VISTA position, or all of them if you have more than one position. And then also, if to the degree that you've developed it, your on-site orientation and training plan. If you've got already an agenda and outline, material for that, bring that along, because on the third day of training, you'll spend a lot of time looking at what makes for an effective training, which elements need to be there, and this is all based on feedback and input from former VISTA projects that have been successful and have told us what really works. So those are a few things to bring with you. And then, of course, we want to always point you to the VISTA campus and encourage you not only to look at the section for supervisors, but also the section for VISTA members, because the more familiar you are with what's there, the better you'll be able to direct your VISTA members to find those resources. So that's it for this session. I want to thank you all for making the time in your busy schedules to be with us today. I want to wish you smooth travels when you go to your orientation, whether you're heading to Boston or Chicago. And we look forward to seeing you online. We'll have every month ongoing training opportunities through webinars for VISTA supervisors. Again, special thanks to Sarah Brady from the Ohio State office for leading us today in this session, and for Andy Clark at Education Northwest for making the technology so smooth and easy to work with. And thank you all again for participating. Have a great day.